Well, hello and welcome to everybody in the world of tone. I am incredibly excited today to introduce a guest that we have that we're very honored to have. And all of us, I think, at some point or another, if not at this very moment, are using some of their products on our very own pedal boards. It's none other than Henry, one of the geniuses and masterminds behind GFI. Welcome, Henry.
Welcome.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me here.
Now, Henry, one question that I've always wanted to ask you is, what does GFI stand for?
Well, it doesn't stand for anything, actually.
So it could be any. We could just make it up right now. Like for your Wikipedia page, they could just make up anything.
Yes, you can do that.
So you've heard it here first, folks. You can whoever wants to start the GFI Wikipedia page, it can have an origin of whatever thing you want it to have, because there is no origin. It's just three of the greatest letters out there. Well, the reason that we've chosen to speak with Henry is GFI has come out with something really, really cool that I've had some time to play around with. And I think that it's going to find a place on a lot of people's pedal boards because of its versatility. We're also working on a video showing some of its versatility. And it is none other than their brand new product, which is an EQ and booster. Very cool. Is the Enigma. Did I say that correctly, Henry?
Yes.
Enigma. And so my understanding, and I feel like I've just scratched the surface of what it does. It has it's a 5-band parametric EQ. It has 7 different EQ types, so you can do what you're calling the F, the M, the V style amp tone stack. So you can sort of replicate some of the classic amplifier tone stacks, Fender, Marshall, Vox, and then you can also do Baxandall, tilt, scoop tilt, and moving wah. So for somebody who doesn't understand, like I think most people maybe have a reference point for like what a Fender or a Marshall or a Vox tone stack might be. How would you explain Baxandall to somebody who is unfamiliar with that? And you're speaking as though you're explaining it to somebody in kindergarten. How would you explain it to somebody?
Well, something like a Baxandall is basically an EQ which you can control the low, the bass, or the treble, and that's why you call it a simple EQ, because it's really simple. You can just control the bass and treble.
Got it. And then comparatively, when you're talking about Baxandall, tilt, scoop tilt, moving wah, how would you describe those types of EQs comparatively?
Okay, in Baxandall, you have the control for bass and treble separately, independently.
Yep.
But for the tilt, when you increase the bass, the treble decreases.
Yep.
And vice versa. So that's why it's called tilt. For the wah, it's basically a bandpass filter with very high key factor. So that's what gives the quack sound of it.
Right. And are you able to adjust you're able to adjust the Q for that as well?
Yes, Q, frequency, and the low end.
And then it also independently, in addition to not only having an EQ foot switch, it also separately has a boost foot switch. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you can use it for a double function. You could use it as a clean boost. You could also use it as an EQ. One of the ways that I thought was really cool, and there's a lot of companies that have done obviously sort of more basic EQs that are kind of straight ahead, like basically graphic EQs that maybe have 2 channels or something like that. But the thing I thought was really cool about this, I've been in the process, Henry, of building a Nashville style pedal board. And most of the Nashville guys will typically use a GE7, typically modded to kind of get it more into the guitar frequencies, as opposed to just kind of generalized bands that are chosen for the GE7 that may not necessarily reference anything in the guitar range. You know, like as we know, most guitar speakers don't produce much when it gets up above 5K. It's sometimes even lower than that. So those frequencies tend to not be that valuable as far as an EQ is concerned. But one thing that I really like to do is sometimes I like having an EQ earlier on in the chain to kind of affect more of what the guitar is doing, and then I like to have one later in the chain. And one of the coolest features of this effect is that with the stereo in, my understanding is, and I haven't experimented with this yet, but I really want to because this would eliminate two pedals on my board, is I could have one that would be acting as the front end EQ and one that would be acting as a back end EQ. And so I could have two separate EQs, and I could use each output as a separate way to EQ different parts of the signal path. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So, I'm liking this already.
Very cool.
And I can have completely different EQs. I could have a Fender style EQ, or I could have a Baxendal EQ, or I could have a tilt, and they could be different on each channel.
Right.
Wow.
So
that's correct.
I have a question. So with that, doing the two, is that doing the two channels by splitting, because it's stereo in, stereo out? Is that what you're doing? Like the left side is through channel 1, the right side is through channel 2?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. I do have a second question. Can you place the boost, like, is the boost always before the EQ or always after, or can you move it which one it hits?
Always after.
Always after. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Very, very nice.
Which I think is the wise way to do it, to kind of use it as a, you know, a clean boost that's just going to be, you know, adding more. And now with the auxiliary switch, can you just assign that to do other functions beyond what's so what would be an example of some ways that we could use, let's say on the back of the pedal, you have an auxiliary switch all the way on the it would be the top left-hand side if you're facing down at the pedal. What could you use that to expand it to do, for example?
You can assign functions such as preset scroll up and down. So you can quickly go up and down the presets, and then you can assign the buttons to do the toggle the booster. And you can configure the booster, the left and the right independently. You can, for example, activate the booster for the left channel, but leave the one on the right channel off. So if you're using the Enigma as a pre-post equalization, you can use the booster on either side, not always on both sides. Yeah.
Okay,
that's really cool. So you not only have two separate EQs that you could have as pre and post, you could also have two separate boost pre and post, and they could be totally different levels. So you could use one if you wanted to, let's say, early on, if you wanted to add more gain to other effects, and then another one just as like a master volume boost to add more total level.
Yes.
Wow.
That's correct.
That's incredible. And
cool.
is the circuitry here, is this 100% digital, or is it a mix of analog and digital? How would you describe this circuit?
It's a mix analog and digital. So the EQ part is digital.
Okay.
But everything else, like for the bypass state, is analog, including the booster.
Very and cool. Does it have an analog dry path in it as well, or is it 100? Is it DSP bypass or
analog bypass?
Okay, great. So there isn't any concern, for example, for any sort of latency or something like that as a consequence of using it?
Yeah, the latency is about 1.5 millisecond, so it should be not noticeable. That's for the digital part.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, it's really cool. I was playing around with it here just to kind of see some of the different modes, and it has kind of the parametric, the simple EQ, and then it has the Pultec mid-range. If somebody's not familiar with, let's say, a Pultec, which is, you know, obviously an awesome piece of studio equipment that's been used on countless recordings, how would you describe sort of the Pultec style EQ comparative to, let's say, just like the simple EQ that everybody might be familiar with on like a graphic band?
So the Pultec mid-range EQ, especially the MEQ5 processor they have, it's basically a 3-band parametric EQ, but with certain restrictions. For example, the frequency you can only set it in steps. So 200 hertz, 400 hertz, 500, 1 kilohertz, and up to 7 kilohertz. And then the 3 bands. The first one covers the low frequency, 200 hertz to 1.5, I think 1.5, and then the low frequency band can only be used for boosting. You cannot do cuts with that.
Got it.
And then the second band is the mid dip. You can only do cuts. You cannot boost. And the high frequency, also a booster. So you have boost, mid, dip, and boost. Yeah, it works almost like a parametric EQ, basically. 3 bands parametric EQ.
And it sounds like so on the original unit, were those all on like a rotary switch or something like that? So you were adjusting those controls, okay? And then you're just mimicking sort of like what those different offsets of each place on the rotary would emulate. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I've actually never personally like used it, but I know in certain sessions that we've done, and obviously recording studios that we record at quite frequently, like in Oakland, we record at 25th Street, and they have them there, and I get to see their engineers working their magic, and I know that it sounds better when they're there, so that's always a cool thing. But I don't want to hog all the space here and asking you questions about this. Brian, do you want to jump in for a minute and ask some questions of Henry?
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. I've been scrolling over the photos and looking at them. I feel like I always ask this every time we get with any pedal manufacturer. Is like I see the USB-C on the back. Is there an editor to go with it? Kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, there will be an editor.
Okay. Is it public now or is it not yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Gotcha.
We plan to release it sometime in January or February.
Very cool.
Next year.
And what will be some of the parameters that you'll be able to control by way of the editor?
Everything.
Okay.
Everything
Very cool.
Including any sort of like auxiliary function, can you like assign like what the the tip versus the ring and something like that is doing?
That's cool.
Yeah.
So kind of like the Tempest editor in a way.
Yes.
The very cool. Or the synesthesia. Very cool. Oh, that's
now
awesome.
I have some other tech questions for you, Henry. Selfishly, as another pedal manufacturer, I see that you're using 1/8" MIDI in and through on the back. So if you're somebody who's watching this as opposed to listening, we have 1/8" TRS MIDI in and through. Have you found that to be a good way to sort of just make everything compact and still be able to have all the functions that people want of MIDI? Have you found there to be complications, drawbacks of using that style as opposed to, let's say, the traditional 5-pin DIN or a traditional 1/4" TRS?
Well, for the customers, it's probably a little bit of complications because you have to find DIN 5 to a 1/8" connector cable.
Right.
Yeah, it's probably not that easy to find, so they probably have to order custom cables.
Okay. Is it a standard MIDI protocol though, or is it like a because everybody there? It seems like the MIDI standard now is kind of meaningless because like Empress has their own way of doing things and Chase Bliss has their own way of doing things, and then there's some people that follow the MIDI standard. So how is this particular effect wired as far as the MIDI is concerned?
It's wired for Type A standard. So the current sync is on the tip. Okay. And the current source is on the ring. Right. But on the MIDI through, there's an option to toggle between the two types. So if one doesn't work, then you can flip it to the other.
Oh, so you can actually decide whether it's Type A or Type B by way of the software.
Yes.
Wow, that's really creative.
Yeah.
Has anybody else done that before, Henry?
I think the MIDI controllers mostly they offer the two options to be.
But have any of the pedal companies done that with their internal MIDI?
I don't know.
Not that I can think of. Do you know any, Brian?
I don't know of any. So would that put it tip active? So like the reason I'm asking this, so there's like MIDI boxes, like the MIDI box for Disaster Area, Strymon, all these guys have MIDI 5-pin in, the TRS 1/4 inch out, but then the guys over at Morningstar have like 1/8 inch. So that's where like those boxes can come in handy. And a lot of these boxes have dip switches or like tip active. Like I'm reading one that says tip active, ring active, tip and ring active. Do you know if there is a preference that has to be set, or is it just like you guys said where you can kind of change it?
The default is type A.
Type A.
There's no specific preference because there's really no fixed standard with it. So yeah, it's best to have the two options configurable.
Cool. Okay. Very cool. Yeah. That's good to know. Yeah, no, I don't know of anyone, Mason. I know on switcher units, I think the MC6 Pro, I think you can mess with that, which one is sending on, but I've not heard of a pedal that does that yet.
Yeah, and neither have I. I mean, I could be wrong. There could be others out there, but I think it's such a smart idea because now, if you change even one effect on your board and it's using MIDI, there could be a whole different protocol that is required in order to make it talk to your rig. So I think the more that manufacturers start to implement these things where the pedal itself can dictate whether it's going to be doing MIDI type A, type B, it gives the user a lot more flexibility without having to reconfigure things. And so I think that's something that definitely people will appreciate. I wanted to share my screen here though, because I know I'm holding it up and like that gives you some sensibility of what it looks like, but I really want to show people like this is, it looks beautiful. Now,
It's
Henry,
stunning.
is this a steel enclosure or is this aluminum?
Aluminum.
So it's a really thick. What's the gauge on this? This is pretty thick, even by pedal standards.
2.5 millimeters.
I mean, it's beautifully done. Nice, kind of like clamshell style. Got a nice kind of tilt to it, so that you have nice access. Just really, really nicely made. I love everything about it. Is that in the faceplate? Is that also metal? And then it's just got the like a Lexan cover.
Yes, it's also aluminum.
It's really stylish. I've always thought you guys did a really great job with your aesthetics at GFI. You think it seemed like that you just put in some extra care in the look. It's really hard to make something that is simple and stylish at the same time.
Yeah.
I really like what you did with this. Henry, before we go to our first round of sponsors, I'm wondering if there's anything here that you want to mention before we break for a moment and talk about a few of the sponsors. I mean, this is just a beautiful looking pedal. The whole setup here with the photos, the graphics, it's just really, really stunning.
Thanks.
Anything you want to mention before the ad break?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to pause right here for just a moment, and I'm going to tell you about a couple of sponsors that make the podcast possible every single week. The first of which are our friends over at the Guitar Sanctuary, one of the Dallas-Fort Worth area's premier guitar, pedalboard, any sort of musical gear equipment is available there. They have great salespersons that can help you with whatever it is that you need, and they offer all sorts of services, including pedalboard building, which we've talked about in the past. You can head over to theguitarsanctuary.com and see all their offerings, whether you're looking for something boutique, whether you're looking for a big brand like Fender or Gibson. They have all those things available there that you can try, or they can ship it right to your door. Again, check out the Guitar Sanctuary at theguitarsanctuary.com. Next, our friends over at Neural DSP. Neural DSP is offering our listeners a special discount where they get 30% off any plugin that they desire, with exception to any new plugins, which will be available for the same discount after they've been released for 90 days. So presumably, if you're willing to wait, you can get any plugin on Neural DSP's website for 30% off using the coupon code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN. Head over to neuraldsp.com, check out the plugins, get yourself that discount. Tell them the chairman sent you. Lastly, our friends over at Sweetwater have an amazing new program to sell your used gear called the Sweetwater Gear Exchange. And one thing that Sweetwater does that's different from all the other companies that offer you the ability to sell your used gear on a large platform is they do not charge any seller fees. You heard that again, any seller fees, so long as you decide to take your earnings and put them on a Sweetwater gift card. If you're somebody like me who is always buying new stuff at Sweetwater anyway, it's a great way to retain 100% of your earnings and be able to keep that on the gift card and redeem it so that you're not giving away 10, 12 or more percent in fees to the company that you're listing with. Check out sweetwater.com/use and set up an account for free. Get buying and get selling. All right. Thank you, Henry, for waiting patiently. Now, I love this pedal. I think it's really cool. I can't wait to dive in. I'm sure that I'm going to have some more questions as I start to kind of go through this and figure this out in terms of the routing capabilities. But if somebody is interested in this, if they want to learn more, obviously they can go to gfisystem.com. They can check out the product page. It looks like you not only have a bunch of different sound options where people can kind of hear how some of these different EQs are practically. It looks like you also have like all sorts of demonstrational videos that maybe show some of these capabilities. If you were like a person who's really into knob turning and all that stuff, it looks like you have an hour-long video on this. Mm-hmm. Is this one that you guys had produced?
No. That was by Mark Johnston, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So Mark Johnston really went deep, and right. His videos are amazing. Absolutely. He spends quite a bit of time. So many great resources here. It's got a 1 meg ohm input impedance, 500 ohm output impedance. So that's good if you want to be able to drive some cables on the output of this thing. It's got really impressive specs. Man, just so feature laden. Like I don't know of any EQs that are out there on the market that offer so many different versions of EQ, the classic rack versions of EQ where you can have your pulp tech, you can have a parametric, you can have a simple EQ, you can get the standard Fender EQs, Marshall, Vox, and I even see here that there are things you can use it for. You can use it on bass, you can use it on acoustic. So just so many different options as far as the way that you're able to utilize this. Is super cool. Yeah. I see here too that there's one that says it's for a Celestion greenback speaker. Is this like if somebody wanted to like run like some sort of like an impulse response or some sort of like load into this?
No, that is actually the 5-band parametric EQ configured as speaker sim filters.
Wow.
Yeah. So on the right side, that is the EQ curve.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw a video today. I think it was Mark. I can't remember who posted it, but he actually talked through this, and it was like had his amp sim pedal going into this through his WED effects, then hitting like the aux cabinet, the aux box thing. So it was really interesting when I thought the same thing. It was like, oh, it has like cab sim stuff. And like, no, it's a EQ filter that go into your cab sim. So I thought that was a really cool. And thank you for also naming it the type of speakers that they are, because you get a lot of companies. I had one company, they named it something really wild, and I was like, oh, I don't know what that is. Like, oh, it's like a Celestion Gold. I'm like, oh, okay. If you could have put gold something like, so I would have known. So that was really cool. I really like that. Yeah, very handy.
So on a product like this, Henry, how long does something like this take to develop? Like how long had this been in development before the time that it came out?
About 10 months.
10 months. And so,
holy crap.
Like for the Duophony, like were these being developed in parallel, or was it like that one took, 10 months or more, and then you just immediately started on this one? Or do you generally have like multiple products that are kind of in development simultaneously?
Usually I do some things in parallel, but not in equal proportions. So one of them will take most of the focus, and then the other maybe just like 10%.
Okay. How many different products are you working on right now? You don't have to tell us what they are, but how many are you working on right now?
Just one.
Just one. Okay.
Just one.
All right. Now, one product that I wanted to talk about, just because we're here and we're here with you with GFI, is I'm a big fan of the Cab Zeus. And I use that a lot on a lot of my rigs because it allows me to, and I don't know that I haven't really seen anybody use it the same way that I used it. I've made a video about it, and I'll link it here if people want to check it out. But what I do is I run, all of my traditional overdrives and dry style pedals into the front of an amplifier. I take a line out of that amplifier, which is mic'd, and that is one channel on my mixer. And then that line out feeds any of the wet effects, or if I'm using a parallel mixer, it'll feed that has some of the wet effects in it that are 100% wet. And then I have all those go into the Cab Zeus, and then the Cab Zeus becomes my stereo wet left and right, and then those are hard panned. And I do that because it doesn't require me to use another set of power amps. I can have some sort of speaker simulation on it that would be somewhat close to what I might use, like a vintage 30 or something like that for the wet cabinets. And it seems to represent a pretty decent version of what I have, because with the line out, I'm just tapping off the output transformer. So I have pretty much everything in my amp except for the speaker. And then I have the Cab Zeus, which is representing sort of the speaker that would be feeding into. And it seems to do a wonderful job without me needing to take 3 amplifiers or a stereo power amp with 2 more cabinets in order to get that same wet, dry, wet spread. Is there going to be any evolution of the Cab Zeus that you can see at any point in the near future, or are you not allowed to say?
Well, there may be. Okay. But honestly, I haven't think much about that. Because if we are going to come up with some updates to the Cab Zeus, it probably has to have some preamp simulation in it. Yeah, so that may take a while.
What about if it was just power amp simulation and you were just using it exclusively as like a wet, dry, wet sort of thing?
Okay, yeah, that might work.
I mean, the truth is that you probably don't necessarily need it if you're using the line out to feed it, because you've already got everything, and you're really just using it as an exaggerated speaker cabinet at that point. And have you seen anybody use it in that fashion? It seemed to me like that was like a really logical way, because I had seen people trying to do versions of that, but they were using like quilters, or they were using something that still required that it be fed into some sort of load or speaker, and so they were still just trying to find smaller ways to bring a power amp onto a pedal board. And to me, it seemed like such an obvious use of that to consolidate space, because all my pedal boards are 10 inches by 17 inches, and they can do full wet dry and have switchers on them.
Yeah.
Was that ever an intention of people using it in that fashion?
Well, not many people have talked to me regarding that setup.
Right.
So I'm not so sure if there are demands for that.
Well, hopefully some people started doing it after I made that video.
I think it's cool.
So
I think it's a cool way to do that, because I have the Cab Zeus too, and it's cool to see. Like, I'm not a manufacturer, obviously, but it's cool to see when new pedals come out and how musicians just have, we all play, guitar or bass or whatever we're playing, and we're like, oh, it'd be cool to try to do this. And then like I have definitely asked whoever runs your guys' social media a couple of times. I'm like, hey, now that the synesthesias came out, can you load the Tempest stuff in it? Like all these different ideas, or hey, can you route it this way, or can you do that? And so it's really cool, Mason, that you were able to use that Cabzus like that, because I would have never thought of that. So it's one of those things you experiment with, and you're like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then you ask the designer, and they're like, oh, I never thought of that. Like that's a really cool way of doing it. So yeah, I gotta give you applaud for that, because that was very, very smart way of doing it.
I mean, it seemed like the infrastructure was there. I didn't have to make any demands of GFI in order to make it work. It just turned out that it worked really well. Because for most of the guys that were running the wet rigs, even in the 80s, most of them were using like 112 Pacific cabinets, which were these really compact 112s that were carpeted. They were closed back, and they either had vintage 30s or EVM 12Ls. So, super linear speaker with the EVM 12Ls, like not really much color to it at all. Vintage 30, of course, has some color to it. And then most likely miking with an SM57, and that was it, and then they were just hard pans. So you can represent that pretty well with the GFI, and it's super small, it's easy to power, and I basically found what preset I want, and I just basically went and I loaded that to every single preset. So if I bump the knob, it's still the same exact preset.
That's so smart.
So every preset on there is that same preset, and I just found the one that I like, and it's great. So I just show up with one amp, and then everything else is contained in the pedal board through the Cabzus.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's very nice.
Yeah. So. And the only trick that I had is I had to just remember, to adjust the level that's coming out of those XLRs, because I thought it was going to be like hot, like you would find like a like a line level, like super, and so I just had to compensate for that so that everything was working good. But you even have a compensation too on there where you can pad it down or boost it up, for whatever you wanted to do with it. And the other cool thing about it too is that if I did want to use a real power amp, or I had amps that had effects loops, I can use the through on the Cabzus, and I can just go straight to those and still use it that way. And I don't have to do anything. I don't have to take apart my pedal board.
Yeah.
So I just think the infrastructure of that product is really, really user friendly and easy. And so I love that effect. I literally use it on every board that I make now. Yeah, it's no joke. I really do.
It's great.
Brian, I've been talking about my rig, and I'm sorry. It's like talking about your kids.
It's all good.
I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll shut up for a while.
No, you're good. You're good. I am curious. Are these now available? I know that you guys announced it. So are they available in stores, like in dealers?
I think most of the dealers have already had it right now.
Very cool, very cool. I know I've been working from home. Obviously, this is not my office setup. This is my home setup. But when I went into the shop this morning, I was talking to the manager, and he talked about that we were ordering them or whatever. So that's good to know that they are available. I'm actually curious if with these platforms, like these pedals, obviously, like I have the Tempest, and I love the Tempest. All these pedals that have come out, and I definitely ask all the time too. And I'm always like, hey, can I do this? And like, oh yeah. And whoever it is, I don't know who the person is, and they're always just like, oh, that's a cool idea. And they leave it at that. I'm like, you're teasing me. But like, do you see like moving forward with these 1/8" midis, like these types of screens? And side note, this EQ screen, it's not touch screen, is it? Right?
No.
Okay. I had to clarify. So like moving forward with these, are there certain parameters that you guys are trying to kind of like you're gonna move to USB-C for the MIDI? Because I know it was like the USB-A, whatever the fat like pin or cable plug. Are you guys trying to move more to a platform where it is all like rounded? Because nowadays you'll get some like I have two switchers. One is a USB-C, one is a USB-A, one of these is a USB. There's all these different types. Are you guys trying to move towards like all of our pedals will eventually, because I've asked and people, and whoever it was like, oh yeah, maybe that will be updated to Tempest or something or whatever it is. Do you guys see yourself moving towards those pedals all having USB-C, all having 1/8 inch, all having editors, or is it just kind of like, that's how we designed it?
For moving on to future products, I'm aiming to have strictly use USB-C because I think it's the best standard for the USB. Yeah, and the cables are also it's easiest to find than the other types nowadays. Yeah. But for existing pedals, I don't think we're going to change the USB connector at this point.
Makes sense.
Take major redesign and everything.
For sure. So like the USB-C ones, because I guess, well, I've had an Apple, but now Apple, I guess, has USB-C ports on it, and Androids have them. Are you guys? I know we have desktop editors for those units. Is there ever going to be an option to plug those USB-Cs into a phone to do like iOS app, or like do an app through your phone or Bluetooth or whatever?
At this moment, it doesn't work with mobile devices, but in the future, it may. Yeah,
very cool.
We may
very cool.
develop.
Very cool. That's awesome.
I have one more question before we go to another ad break, Henry. This is not necessarily related to GFI, although I suppose it could be indirectly. My question for you is as a designer of pedals, because we don't get to talk to a lot of people that design pedals. We do on occasion, but not a lot. What's been a pedal that's come out in the last year or so that's really impressed you?
That's a good one.
That could be either technologically or mechanically, or you just loved how it sounded. Has there been something that's impressed you as somebody that is designing these effects?
Well, I haven't tried these pedals yet, but I think the Maris LVX and their newest reverb, I think they're pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I think the concept is different from the other pedals.
But the question is, are they violating MIDI standards? Maris is a notorious violator of MIDI standards.
Isn't the LVX just 5-pin though? Yeah, LVX is 5-pin.
Some of the other ones I think are not standard, but I'm
they're
kind of teasing.
small
It's sort of meaningless now. Yeah, they do some cool stuff and clearly have really, really great engineering. For those who don't know, Terry Burton, who is one of the engineers there, he was at Strymon for quite a long time and was there during, I think, their most pivotal releases, including El Capistan and Flint and the Timeline. I don't know if he was there by the time Big Sky came out, but I think he was definitely there for Timeline and Mobius. But in any case, and I think that Angelo, who's there, I think he was the one that designed the enclosure for the Line 6 DL4. That the look of the DL4, I think, was him, or that whole 4 series, whether it was the modulation, the MM4, that look of that enclosure was him. And I think he also designed the early Strymon stuff when it was like Disaster Area, when you saw those like really giant footprints. And if you kind of look at the lineage, you'll sort of see that there is a commonality between the DL4 and the early, or was it not Disaster Area? They were called Damage Control.
Damage Control,
Damage Control, not Disaster Area. Sorry, Disaster Area. Damage Control. If you look at the Damage Control stuff, the early Strymon stuff, which is like most of the guys from Strymon that had defected from Line 6 and the DL4, you can see a very a very straight line through them.
Mm-hmm.
Before we continue with more questions for Henry from GFI, I want to turn it over to Brian to talk about a few more of our sponsors that make our podcast possible every week.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, we are so appreciative of our sponsors, as Mason said, to make this podcast possible. And one of those is Mono Creators. We talk about them every single time. I literally, behind me, have multiple, I probably have like 5 or 6 mono gig bags behind me, dual guitars, pedalboard bags, backpacks. They have all sorts of amazing cases, not to mention not just cases, but they have some boards, angled and flat, as well as their new power supplies. Very lightweight. They look very thin, a thin strip that can fit under their boards. Check them out. They have a discount code. It's Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, for 10% off. Go to monocreators.com and go check them out. You won't be disappointed. High quality, top to bottom. You'll love them. Another one of those guys is Bestronix. Bestronix, btpa.com. They have a code DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS, for 10% off. They have plugs, cabling, quad cortex, chocks, cables. They have all sorts of stuff, looms, custom heat shrink, prints, all sorts of stuff. Brad and them truly are the best, and it's their name. Go check them out. I literally just got like 3. I think I say it every week because it's true. I just had like 3 packages delivered from them of just DC connectors for all of our custom power cables. So check them out. Use the code, save 10% off. Final one is going to be Stringjoy. As musicians, guitarists, we need strings. You can't, I mean, you could play with a broken string. I've seen many people do it, but you might want to have all the strings on your guitar to play. Stringjoy is a great company where they can send you a subscription packet of strings that you have so many every single week or month, or how many you're going to think you're going to go through. Use their code BOARDS for 10% off on their subscription, or just get a pack and try it out. If you like them, subscribe and start getting them in bulk. That's it for our sponsors. Yet again, thank you so much for sponsoring this, and I'll turn it back to you, Mason.
Thank you, Brian. Well, a couple more things that I want to talk to you about, Henry, before we complete for today. So you said that the Maris has impressed you as an effect that's come out in the last year or so. Is there a company in general who you feel like, in terms of design, in terms of the mechanical aspects, that you feel like is consistently putting out really high quality stuff, and that you would recommend, like a customer of GFI would likely like this sort of product that's made by a different manufacturer? Is there any that you can recommend based on your experience with them, your understanding of the mechanical designs, and your understanding of the circuit designs within?
I think one brand that I can recommend highly is, based on my experience, is Chairmen stuff. Yeah. And New Neighbors.
Yeah.
They also put out pretty solid stuff.
Yeah, Brian New Neighbor is a genius. I think his biggest contribution, and you can tell me what you think, is I don't know anybody that's been able to maximize a spin chip more than Brian New Neighbor.
Seriously.
To design with the amount of efficiency that he does, and I know this is getting in the weeds for some people, but like Brian has figured out how to squeeze blood out of a turnip. I mean, it's incredible what he's been able to do with what he has available to him, and I think doesn't get enough credit because he doesn't really offer. I think like what's the newest reverb that they have?
Illumint.
Yeah, like that's probably the first time there's been like a screen even on a New Neighbor. Like usually they're much more simplified, and he hasn't gone that direction, and he totally could do a Strymon style design, but is just kind of abbreviated, I think, what he's doing. And my understanding is they actually sold to Quilter or to QSC, because Quilter is the Q in QSC, the powered monitors. And I think Pat Quilter, either they merged with Quilter or they merged with QSC. I'm not exactly sure how the sort of the division of the corporations are. But yeah, I think Brian makes tremendous stuff. He's a fantastic designer. Really, really great stuff. I agree completely. Now, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was just gonna say, out of the box, those pedals are phenomenal.
Yeah.
And the Lumen, as I don't see them on many boards. I have okay, maybe 4 or 5 I've seen them on. I have one board that has it on right now, and like when you get a pedal and you're going through the stock presets, obviously, and the stock presets are based on what the company made. Whoever's doing their stock presets, especially on the Lumen and everything, like hit the nail on the head perfectly. Like there's some stuff to like, hey, what did you do to get that sound? I'm like, preset 9, just that's it. Don't even touch it. Oh, what are your settings? I don't freaking know, because it's just the preset. And I like that, but also it feels so simplistic. Like I had the mono wet reverb that they had, and then they came out with the stereo wet, and I had that, and then I had it with is it like a Ethernet cable type of connection to a foot switch that they had,
right.
And like I had all of those different versions, and it was just always consistently like really good sounding. It wasn't digitally sound, like it just was really nice. So I too agree. They've come up with some great stuff.
Yeah, they're really fantastic. Another question that I have for you regarding this sort of topic of conversation, Henry, and I'm sorry that you're bearing the brunt of this, because again, we don't get too many pedal manufacturers on here, so I'm always just curious how other people think about it. But do you believe that it is possible to have a totally original analog overdrive pedal at this point in time? Because there's so many people that we will see, and I think some of it maybe is marketing, and then some of them maybe just don't know. But I'm always suspicious when somebody says it's a totally original design that's never been done before. Do you have some suspicions when that claim is put out there about an analog overdrive?
Well, something that's totally original is maybe possible, but the question if it sounds good or not, I don't know.
Right.
But there's only so much circuit design that can produce overdrive sounds. So it's probably hard to find something that's completely original at this point.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing that I've run into, and I think that, as you said, I think that it was very wise, in fact, that you said that if you want it to sound good, because typically when somebody's brought me something, let's say, or they say, or they're on a forum or something like that, and they're showing a schematic, a lot of times it's like they're doing things that are unnecessary to try to get to the same place that, let's say, a more streamlined or more efficient way of doing it would produce. But they see that inefficiency or that sort of roundabout way as somehow being something that is unique to the circuit, but it's still really just, the Klon, or it's still just a tube screamer, or it's still, whatever the circuit may be, some of the kind of the standard archetypes of circuit. So, I think it's really interesting at the same token, or by the same token, that some people are really up in arms when they see a manufacturer that they like, or a manufacturer that they dislike, and they come out with an overdrive, and people will say, well, it's just a this. I'm sort of wondering if there needs to be sort of like a reset of the expectations. And the analogy that I use is that in essence, with most of the pedal manufacturers, especially when it relates to the analog sort of overdrive and distortion territory, is that we're sort of all making a filet mignon. We're all making a specific type of steak. And if you take a steak to one chef, they're going to have a specific preparation of that aligns with whatever they like. You take it to a different chef and they're going to prepare it a completely different way. They maybe like to use a sous vide, and another guy likes to use a charcoal grill, and another guy likes to use a skillet. There's all these different ways with which we can produce this sound, and we go about it maybe different ways. But the thing I always recommend to people is like, there's 100 guys that make a tube screamer, but which one of them actually, do you trust with their ear so that it aligns with your ear? Because that's ultimately what's going to matter. Is if the chef that you bring your steak to it understands your palate and is going to be able to deliver something to you that's in the way that you like it, because the variations of where they all start, it can be very, very close. But the results can be quite different depending on the preparation, the ingredients that are used to sort of surround sort of the main ingredient, as it were, in this analogy. Do you feel like that is a accurate synthesis maybe of how one might go about this sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it's pretty accurate.
Okay, well, there you go, people. You've heard it from me and a little bit from Henry that it's very hard to produce a good sound in overdrive because there are limited ways with which you can produce overdriven sounds. Brian, I'll take a break again.
Yeah, you're good. No, you're good. But here, go ahead. I have another one, but I would love to know if you have a favorite.
Well, maybe it's just this synesthesia.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that one a lot. I have yet to as rig builders, people are like, oh, you probably, jam on gear constantly and all this, but that's one pedal I've had come through probably 20 or 30 times, and I've played through, and man, this sounds amazing, but I've never been able to sit down with it. And I appreciate just the face value of what that pedal does with the little bit of tinkering that I can do, just how great it sounds. So the whole
filter
thing.
I love the envelope filter aspect. Is really good on it.
Yes, I agree. Deceptively good. Yeah. I love the option of stacking the two, the envelope filter, that's always those are stuff that I'm not, as me where I play, I don't use those types of things. So just demoing the board, I don't
I would love to see you use envelope filter on a worship.
I literally I was sent a fuzz pedal today from a company, and I don't use fuzz. So, and someone's like, I would love to hear you use that. And I'm like, the same thing with an envelope filter. But it's one of those pedals that when I'm demoing or doing my final checks on it, that I get and I'm totally being honest about this. I'm not just saying it because you're here. I literally will get stuck just playing on. It's funny enough that you said the envelope filter, because that's one of the ones that I'm like, ooh, I'm feeling spicy. I'm going to do something I've never used before. And it's fun and it sounds really cool. And the fact of stacking a secondary sound onto it, when that pedal came out, I immediately was like, guys, make this the Tempest 2.0, whatever it is. I was just delay and reverb or two reverbs. It's just brilliantly designed and it's nice and simple. I love the editor and the size of it is really great. So yeah, no, I have to agree. I would love to know, we kind of do this just randomly. If you were on an island and you had to pick 3 of your products, just your 3, which 3 would you pick?
You're moving to an island in the Philippines.
Moving to an island.
There's only room for 3 pedals.
Only room for 3 pedals. What would what would you pick as your 3? And we'll keep it to your stuff, just because. Why not?
Well, I'll pick the Specular Tempest, the Synesthesia, and the Enigma.
See,
no overdrive.
Maybe
you're getting that from your amp.
Yeah, we get it from the amp.
Okay, so what amp are you going to choose for this desert island in the Philippines? Or I guess it would be a desert island. This tropical island in the Philippines.
Well, it's the Fender hot rod.
Hot rod. Huh?
Hot rod.
I love the hot rod.
Let's hope it does okay with the humidity.
just smack it a couple times. That's awesome.
Bring your deoxit. in when you design a product, Henry, is there a specific guitar that you use? Do you use a lot of different guitars, or how do you typically kind of go about testing stuff when you're developing a product?
I'm using the Tele and a Strat.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Do you think it's a deficit when a designer doesn't consider the pedals that might come before or after a product? And I ask this because I feel like Brian and I and Grant have a unique perspective on effects pedals, because most people who buy effects pedals test them on their own. But when we get pedals, we're generally integrating them with a group of effects. And so when we're testing them, we get to see how they behave with 5 or more pedals before it and 5 or more pedals after it. And the behavior of a lot of these pedals is very different in the context of a pedal board as it is independently. As a designer, do you place any level of importance on how these effects might work in other environments, or do you tend to think of them as in isolation more?
Well, I think it depends on the the nature of the pedals, the effects. You may need to emphasize that aspects of considering the pedals that may come before or after that for things like overdrive or compressor pedals. But for something like delays, reverb, maybe it's less important. Because those type of effects are generally linear type processing technically. So
how important do you feel like it is that sorry, go ahead, please.
Okay. For distortion type of pedals or overdrive, you may need more to consider a wider range of pedals.
How important do you feel like the input impedance and output impedance is for effects? Like there isn't really a standard as far as effects pedals are concerned, especially like if people are trying to make things the way that they were at a certain point in time. They may have these really low input impedances that are, loading the guitar down greatly, in really high output impedances that are not very efficient with cables. How important do you feel like it is to have, like in your case, you have a 1 meg, I think on almost everything that you guys make, it's 1 meg input and 500 ohm output. How critical do you think it is for effects to be in that spec range?
I think it's important to have high enough input impedance, but not too high, because too high input impedance will generally induce more noises and instability. Well, one meg is about optimal, I think.
Well, most guitar amps are 1 meg.
Yes. And for output impedance, generally you want to be as low as possible, but not too low. That's what I found throughout my research. About between 100 ohms to 1K is about optimal.
Well, 1K can even not be great, like on some of those, if you're talking about BJT or something like that, or a JFET. They're not really that. I mean, the more capacitance that they see on the output, the worse they perform. So, if you're going to drive a 50-foot cable back to your amp, they're not so great at that. Just many little patch cables between effects, maybe not so bad. But yeah, I think it's a smart idea to go as low as you can reasonably on the output and then have that higher input impedance. And it's interesting when we see, it would be an interesting topic if we could ever get him, Brian, but like Pete Cornish on all of his rigs, whatever pedals he integrates into them, he buffers, because he puts them into basically little effects loops. So each effect is in its own sort of, true bypass loop in essence, but it's not true bypass. He buffers every loop individually. Wow. So every single pedal is seeing the same input and output impedance across each loop. So he's going like to great lengths to control the input and output impedance so that every pedal is seeing the exact same thing.
It's identical. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, well, the drawback to this would be those gain stages after a while would eventually add up, and it could be kind of noisy. Although he purports that he's got this really crazy low signal to noise ratio. So I'm not exactly sure how he's getting back to it, back to this really low, like noise floor, because if you had 12 pedals and you had 12 buffered gain stages between every loop, I don't know exactly how he'd be doing it, but really interesting, way to try to, I think it's like the opposite end of trying to compensate for, irregularities between the pedals. I mean, obviously some pedals may not like those impedances, but I guess they'll sound the same, all the time if they're always receiving the same input and output impedances, no matter what's coming before or after it. So I don't know, maybe that's the gamble he's taking on that.
Yeah, that's crazy that he does that. That's a lot. Yeah, that's not like that. That's I actually never knew that, so that's a really cool.
I'll send you if you're curious about it, Henry, and I'll send it to you, Brian. I have a complete drawing that somebody had sent me of a rig that he made for Bryan Adams, the Canadian pop singer.
Oh wow!
He had a bunch of hits in like the 80s and 90s, and he only uses twisted pair shielded cabling on everything.
You said Brian or Ryan?
Bryan Adams, not Ryan.
Okay, because I know there's a Ryan too.
There's a Ryan Adams who came later. This is Bryan
that's
Adams.
why I was asking. Okay.
Yeah, but he uses he uses like all mic cable, and he floats the ground, on one side of it, and then ties it, down on the other, and it's really interesting, and
that's nuts.
He's calling his systems, I think, like semi balanced. I'm not exactly sure how that works when you're talking about a single ended, system. All pedals are single ended and not. So I don't know if you can really get to that, but bless his heart, he's got something good going on, and obviously everybody loves his stuff. So there's something to be said about that, but. Yeah, Henry, it was such a pleasure to have you, and I'm so grateful that you've brought this out and that you were willing to talk to us. And I'm in the process of making a separate video for people to check out on some of the capabilities. It won't be as long as Mark Johnston's, but it will emphasize the ways that I think it's most usable for a guitar player like me, and hopefully some people will connect with that and they'll want to check this out. We'll have all of the links for GFI, this product, our sponsors, all listed in the description and the show notes. Please do give us a like if you enjoyed the conversation. Please do check out all of GFI's offerings, while their socials and all that stuff, again, in the description. And if you support our sponsors, you're supporting us in turn, and we'd love it if you'd write us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast, because those are influential in our rankings. And I just wanted to say, as an aside, we got a report just the other day that showed where we stack up in the music commentary category. We're ranked number 38. So this is a pretty high ranking, considering that we're talking about stuff that's super esoteric apparently people listen to this. So not only are we number one in Bangladesh because of Brian's IP scrambling software, but we're number 38 worldwide in music commentary. So that is something we're very appreciative. We thank everybody for listening. We thank you again, Henry, for being here on behalf of GFI. And until next time, we will see you guys later.
Bye, guys.
See you guys. Bye.